The wedding dress felt like a noose around Emma Hartwell's neck. She stood before the full-length mirror in her childhood bedroom, watching her mother fuss with the antique lace veil that had been in their family for 3 generations. Outside, thunder rumbled across the Kentucky hills, and rain began to patter against the windows like nervous fingers. In exactly 2 hours, she would marry a man whose face she'd seen only once. In a photograph her father had thrust at her 3 weeks ago with eyes that pleaded for understanding she couldn't give. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," her mother whispered, but her voice cracked on the last word. Margaret Hartwell had aged 10 years in the past month. Ever since the bank had threatened to foreclose on Hartwell Farm, 5 generations of their family had worked this land, survived droughts and wars and the Depression, but they couldn't survive her father's stroke and the medical bills that had piled up like autumn leaves. Emma had watched her parents grow hollow with worry until the day James Hartwell came home with what he called their salvation. A marriage proposal from the wealthy Blackwood family, whose son needed a wife and whose money could save the farm. The price was simply Emma's future. She touched the cool glass of the mirror, meeting her own green eyes. At 24, she'd imagined her wedding day differently. She'd pictured love and laughter, not this quiet desperation. She'd dreamed of marrying Tom Reynolds, the veterinarian's son who'd kissed her under the oak tree last summer and promised to wait until his practice was established. But Tom's modest income couldn't save her family, and Emma had been raised to believe that family came before everything else, even before her own heart. The stranger she was about to marry was named Daniel Blackwood. He was 32, a businessman from Chicago who'd recently inherited his family's estate just outside of town. The Blackwoods had old money, the kind that survived stock market crashes and changing times. According to her father, Daniel had specifically requested a marriage arrangement rather than courting in the traditional way. He'd seen Emma at a church social 6 months ago and made inquiries through a mutual acquaintance. The proposal had been purely transactional, delivered through lawyers with the efficiency of a business merger. In exchange for Emma's hand in marriage, the Blackwood family would pay off all of the Hartwell's debts and provide a generous settlement. No romance, no courtship, just signatures on contracts and a wedding that felt more like a funeral. Emma had met Daniel Blackwood only once, 2 weeks ago in the formal parlor of the Blackwood estate. He'd been tall and dark-haired, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a mouth that never quite smiled. He'd shaken her hand with cool formality and asked if she had any questions about the arrangement. She'd been too numb to ask anything except whether he expected her to move to Chicago. His answer had been cryptic and unsettling. "We'll discuss our living arrangements after the wedding," he'd said in a voice that suggested the matter was far more complicated than geography. Then he'd excused himself, leaving her alone in a house that felt like a mausoleum. Now, as her mother pinned the final flower in her hair, Emma felt a tremor of something she couldn't name. Fear, certainly, but also a strange curiosity. What kind of man bought himself a bride? What secrets lived behind those gray eyes? And why did she feel, despite everything, that this wedding was going to change her life in ways she couldn't possibly imagine? The small church was nearly empty, which somehow made everything worse. Emma had grown up in this town where everybody knew everybody, where weddings were community celebrations that filled every pew with well-wishers and joy. But this ceremony felt clandestine, almost shameful, with only immediate family members scattered among the wooden benches. Her younger sister Sarah sat in the front row, crying openly into a handkerchief. Her father, still moving slowly from the stroke, leaned heavily on his cane, his face a mask of gratitude and guilt that broke Emma's heart more than her own sacrifice did. The Blackwood family presence was equally sparse. An elderly woman in elegant black sat alone on the groom's side, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her expression unreadable behind a delicate veil. Emma's mother had whispered that this was Daniel's Aunt Vivian Blackwood, the family matriarch. No other Blackwood relatives had come. No friends, no business associates, nobody to celebrate Daniel's wedding day. The absence felt deliberate and strange, as though this marriage was something to be hidden rather than celebrated. Emma walked down the aisle on her father's arm, each step feeling like a mile. The church candles flickered in the draft from the storm outside, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Daniel stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored black suit, his posture military straight, his hands clasped behind his back. As she approached, he turned to face her, and for just a moment something flickered across his features. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition, or something else she couldn't identify. His gray eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. This was not the look of a man entering a business arrangement. This was something else entirely. The minister, old Reverend Patterson, who'd baptized Emma as a baby, spoke the traditional words with a heaviness in his voice. He kept the ceremony brief, perhaps sensing that drawn-out sentiments would only deepen the sadness that hung over the proceedings like fog. When it came time for the vows, Daniel's voice was steady and clear, but Emma noticed his hands trembling slightly as he placed the ring on her finger. The gold band felt foreign and heavy, like a shackle disguised as jewelry. Her own voice shook as she repeated the words that would bind her to this stranger forever. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Patterson said quietly. "You may kiss the bride?" Daniel stepped closer, and Emma held her breath. His hand came up to cup her cheek with surprising gentleness, his thumb brushing along her jawline in a gesture that felt almost protective. When his lips touched hers, the kiss was soft and brief, but something electric passed between them. Emma's eyes flew open in surprise, meeting Daniel's startled gaze. For just a second, she saw something vulnerable in those gray eyes, something almost desperate, before he pulled away and the mask of formality returned. The reception at the Blackwood estate was equally subdued. The grand dining room had been prepared with quiet elegance, but the handful of guests barely filled one end of the long mahogany table. Emma sat beside her new husband in a daze, picking at food she couldn't taste, nodding through conversations she couldn't follow. Daniel spoke little, his attention seeming to be elsewhere, though occasionally she felt his gaze on her, heavy and thoughtful. Aunt Vivian watched them both with sharp, calculating eyes that missed nothing. As the afternoon wore into evening and the guests began to depart, reality settled over Emma like a winter chill. Her parents hugged her goodbye with tears in their eyes, her father pressing a kiss to her forehead and whispering, "You're saving us all, Emma girl. Never forget that." Her sister Sarah clung to her, sobbing until their mother gently pulled her away. Then they were gone, and Emma was alone in this enormous house with a man she didn't know and a future she couldn't fathom. Daniel appeared at her elbow, startling her. "We should talk," he said quietly, "before tonight. There are things you need to understand." His face was pale in the dimming light, and Emma realized with a shock that he looked almost as frightened as she felt. Daniel led Emma through the maze of the Blackwood mansion, their footsteps echoing on marble floors, past rooms filled with antique furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts. The house felt abandoned despite its grandeur, as though no real life had existed within these walls for years. They climbed a curved staircase to the second floor, and Emma's heart began to race with apprehension. She'd been raised with proper values, but she also understood what was expected on a wedding night. The thought of intimacy with this stranger made her hands go cold. But Daniel didn't lead her to a bedroom. Instead, he opened the door to what appeared to be a study, lined with books from floor to ceiling, with a fire crackling in the hearth and two leather chairs facing each other across a low table. He gestured for her to sit, then moved to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. His hands were shaking noticeably now. "I owe you the truth," he said, handing her a glass before sinking into the opposite chair, "and an apology. I've brought you into a situation that isn't what you think it is." He took a long drink, gathering courage, then met her eyes directly. "I didn't marry you because I wanted a wife. I married you because I had no other choice. And now you're trapped in something that could be dangerous." Emma set down her untouched glass carefully, her mind racing. "What are you talking about?" The arrangement was clear. "Money for marriage. Your family needed an heir, my family needed help. That's what my father told me." "Your father was told what my Aunt Vivian wanted him to know," Daniel said bitterly. "The truth is far more complicated." He stood and began to pace, running his hands through his dark hair in agitation. "My family isn't what it appears to be. The Blackwood fortune was built on secrets and lies, and I've spent the last 5 years trying to untangle myself from it. 3 months ago, I thought I'd finally succeeded. I was ready to walk away from all of it, the money, the estate, everything. I was going to start over somewhere new, somewhere clean." "Then why didn't you?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression tortured. Because my younger brother died. Marcus was killed in what the police called an accident, but I know it was murder. He'd discovered something about our family's business dealings, something that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. After his death, I inherited everything, including the target on my back. My Aunt Vivian insisted I needed to marry immediately, said it was the only way to protect myself. At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. Emma's mind struggled to process this information. She'd married into a family involved in criminal activity. Her sacrifice to save the farm had pulled her into something far darker than she'd imagined. But why me? She asked. Why specifically me? And why didn't you just tell me the truth before the wedding? I deserved to know what I was getting into. Daniel knelt before her chair, bringing himself to eye level with her. This close, she could see the fine lines of strain around his eyes, the shadows of sleepless nights. I chose you because I'd been watching you for months, Emma, not in the way my aunt suggested to your father. I knew your family was struggling, but that's not why I asked for this arrangement. I chose you because when I saw you at that church social, helping organize the children's program, laughing with the elderly ladies, defending the stray dog someone wanted to chase away, I saw something I'd never seen in my world. Genuine goodness. Kindness without agenda. I thought if I had to marry someone to satisfy my aunt's schemes, at least I could choose someone who deserved the financial security the arrangement would bring. He took a shaky breath. But I couldn't tell you the truth before today. My aunt had people watching both of us. If she'd suspected that I planned to explain everything, she would have called off the wedding and found another way to control me. And your family would have lost the farm. I gambled that you'd forgive me once you understood the full picture. It was selfish and cowardly, and I'm sorrier than you can possibly know. Emma stood abruptly, moving away from him to the window where rain still streaked the glass. Her reflection looked like a stranger's, a woman in a wedding dress caught in a nightmare. You still haven't explained what you meant about danger. If your aunt wanted you married for some scheme, what does that mean for me? Am I in danger too? The silence stretched so long that Emma finally turned to look at Daniel. What she saw in his face made her blood run cold. Earlier today, he said slowly, one of Marcus's old friends, someone I trust, managed to get a message to me during the reception. He said he'd uncovered what Marcus died trying to expose. Our family's legitimate businesses are just a front. For the past 30 years, the Blackwoods have been laundering money for one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the Midwest. My Aunt Vivian isn't just the family matriarch. She's been running the operation since my father died. Emma's legs felt weak. She gripped the windowsill for support. And marrying me, how does that fit into this? That's what I only figured out tonight, Daniel said grimly. The message also said that Vivian needs me married because, under the terms of my father's will, I can only access certain accounts and properties if I have a wife. She needs my cooperation to keep the operation running smoothly. But more than that, a married man with a respectable wife from an old local family provides the perfect cover for the business. You make me look stable, trustworthy, invested in the community. You're not my partner in this, Emma. You're my shield. And if anything goes wrong, you're the one who'll take the fall alongside me. The room seemed to tilt around Emma. She'd sacrificed everything for her family, walked into this marriage with open eyes knowing it would be difficult, but she'd never imagined this. She wasn't just trapped in a loveless arrangement. She was implicated in criminal activity, a pawn in a dangerous game played by people who'd already committed murder. Her parents had no idea they'd sold their daughter to criminals. They thought they were accepting help from a respectable family, never knowing the money that would save their farm was stained with blood. I want to leave, Emma heard herself say, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Right now. Before this goes any further, we'll have the marriage annulled. I'll go home, and my family will have to find another way to manage. Emma, wait. Daniel moved toward her but stopped when she held up a hand. Please, just listen. I've been planning this for weeks. I didn't bring you here to trap you. I brought you here to help us both escape. But I needed the marriage to be real, at least on paper, to access certain resources. Now that we're married, I can get to accounts my aunt doesn't know about, funds Marcus set aside before he died. Money that's clean and ours by right. We can disappear, both of us start somewhere new where the Blackwood name means nothing. Emma stared at him, trying to understand. You want me to run away with you? I don't even know you. How do I know this isn't another manipulation? How do I know you're any different from your aunt? You don't, Daniel admitted quietly. You have no reason to trust me except my word, and I know how little that means right now. But think about this. If you leave tonight, what happens? The marriage will be investigated. My aunt will make sure of it because she can't afford for me to be single again. She'd dig into why you left, and she'd discover that I told you about the family business. That makes you a liability, someone who knows too much. And it puts your entire family at risk because she assumed you told them everything. The implications hit Emma like a physical blow. By trying to protect herself, she'd endanger her parents and sister. The Blackwoods' money had already touched the Hartwell farm. If Vivian Blackwood was as dangerous as Daniel claimed, she wouldn't allow potential witnesses to her operation to simply walk away. Emma felt the trap closing around her, walls of impossible choices where every option led to disaster. There's another way, Daniel continued, moving carefully closer. We play along for exactly 1 week. We act like the happy newlyweds while I quietly move the funds Marcus left into accounts only we can access. I have contacts who can provide us with new identities, people Marcus trusted who are ready to help. In 7 days, we disappear during a planned trip to Chicago. By the time my aunt realizes we're gone, we'll be untraceable. And the evidence Marcus gathered, the proof of everything, will be delivered to the FBI. Vivian and her associates will be arrested, and your family will be safe because they'll be viewed as innocent victims of the scheme, not participants. Emma's mind raced through the possibilities, looking for flaws in the plan, trying to think past her fear and confusion. If your brother already gathered evidence, why hasn't he already gone to the authorities? Why did he die with the truth still hidden? Because the corruption goes deeper than just my family, Daniel said. Marcus discovered that several local officials are on the Blackwood payroll, including at least one person in the sheriff's department. He was waiting to connect with federal agents he could trust when he died. His friend has been carefully vetting FBI contacts for 3 months, making sure the information goes to someone who can't be bought. Everything is ready. We just need 1 week to position ourselves to disappear safely. Emma walked to the fireplace, staring into the flames. She thought about her parents, who'd raised her to be honest and decent, who would be horrified if they knew what their desperation had led to. She thought about her sister Sarah, only 18, with her whole life ahead of her. She thought about Tom Reynolds and the simple future she'd imagined, now impossibly distant. And she thought about the man behind her, a stranger who claimed to be offering salvation but might be leading her deeper into darkness. If I agree to this, she said slowly, not turning around, what happens after we disappear? You're talking about new identities, new lives. What exactly are you proposing? Do we stay married? Do we separate once we're safe? Do you expect me to pretend to be your loving wife forever? She heard Daniel move closer, felt his presence at her back. I expect nothing from you beyond cooperation for the next 7 days, he said quietly. Once we're safe, once the authorities have shut down my aunt's operation and your family is secure, you'll be free to make whatever choice you want. If you want a divorce, I'll give you one and enough money to build whatever life you choose. If you want to return to Kentucky under a new name, I'll arrange it. You'll owe me nothing, Emma. This is my family's sin, not yours. All I'm asking is that you help me make it right, and in return, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you and your family are protected and provided for. Emma finally turned to face him. In the firelight, Daniel Blackwood looked younger than his years, vulnerable despite his height and broad shoulders. She saw genuine remorse in his eyes and something else too. A desperate kind of hope, as though her answer meant more to him than just the success of his escape plan. You said you'd been watching me for months. That you chose me for this arrangement. Was any of that true, or was it all part of the scheme? Daniel met her gaze steadily. Every word was true. When I saw you that day, something shifted inside me. I'd lived for so long in a world of corruption and lies that I'd forgotten people like you existed. You reminded me that goodness was real, that it was worth fighting for. I used that knowledge selfishly when I proposed this arrangement, but my admiration for you was never a lie. It's probably the most honest thing about me. Emma made her decision not with her heart or even her mind, but with the bone-deep certainty that comes from truly understanding there's only one path forward. 1 week, she said firmly. We do this your way for 7 days, but I want daily updates on every detail of the plan. No more secrets, no more manipulation. If I'm risking my life and my family's safety, I'm doing it with full knowledge of what's happening. Relief flooded Daniel's face so completely that Emma saw, perhaps for the first time, the real man beneath the careful control. Agreed, he said quickly. Complete transparency from here on out. And Emma, I promise you, whatever it takes, I'll keep you and your family safe. That's not just talk. That's a vow more binding than the one I made in church today. The week that followed was the strangest of Emma's life. By day, they played their parts perfectly. They appeared together at breakfast, took walks through the estate grounds, received the few wedding gifts that arrived. Aunt Vivian watched them constantly with those sharp, calculating eyes, clearly satisfied with the arrangement she'd engineered. Emma learned to smile and nod to play the blushing bride, while her stomach churned with anxiety. Daniel was unfailingly courteous, treating her with a careful respect that made the deception slightly easier to bear. But at night, behind the locked door of Daniel's study, they became co-conspirators. Emma met Marcus's friend, a quiet man named James who worked as an accountant and who'd been Marcus's roommate at college. He showed her copies of the evidence Marcus had died protecting, ledgers and photographs and recorded conversations that painted a damning picture of the Blackwood operation. The scope of it astonished her. Millions of dollars, dozens of businesses, connections that reached into state government. Her family's farm payment was less than a rounding error in the larger scheme. Marcus wanted to burn it all down, James told her on the third night. He said the Blackwood name had caused enough damage. He was proud of you, he added, looking at Daniel. He told me his brother was one of the good ones, trapped in a bad system. He hoped you'd find a way out. Emma watched Daniel's face as James spoke about Marcus, saw the grief that he kept carefully hidden during the day. She began to understand that Daniel's pain ran deeper than just losing a brother. He'd lost his ally, his conscience, perhaps the only person in his family who'd understood what he was trying to do. In a strange way, she and Daniel were both mourning the lives they'd lost, even if those lives had been taken from them in very different ways. On the 5th night, something shifted between them. They'd been reviewing the final details of their escape, planned for 2 days hence during a supposed trip to Chicago for business meetings. Emma had been taking notes, her practical nature asserting itself even in extraordinary circumstances, when she realized Daniel had stopped talking. She looked up to find him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "What?" she asked quietly. "I was just thinking how extraordinary you are," Daniel said. Most people would have fallen apart in this situation. They would have panicked or refused to cooperate or broken down. But you've stayed clear-headed and strong through all of it. You've asked intelligent questions and helped refine the plan. You're remarkable, Emma Hartwell. He paused, then corrected himself softly. Emma Blackwood. The name sounded different in his voice, less like a chain and more like a gift. Emma felt something warm unfurl in her chest, a feeling she'd been trying very hard to ignore for days. "You're not what I expected either," she admitted. "When I married you, I thought I was getting a cold businessman who saw me as a transaction. But you're not that person. You're trapped just like I am, trying to do the right thing in impossible circumstances. That takes its own kind of courage." Daniel moved closer, and this time Emma didn't step away. "When this is over," he said hesitantly, "when we're safe and you're free to choose whatever life you want, I hope you'll give me a chance to court you properly. Not as part of an arrangement or an escape plan, but as a man who's fallen completely in love with his wife and wants to spend his life proving worthy of her." Emma's heart hammered in her chest. She thought about Tom Reynolds and the simple love he'd offered, now seeming like something from another lifetime. She thought about the wedding she'd dreamed of and the one she'd endured. And she thought about this complicated, damaged, decent man in front of her who'd given her truth when he could have given her lies, who'd offered her freedom when he could have demanded obedience. "Ask me again in a week," she whispered, "when we're both free and this nightmare is behind us." Ask me then. The night of their escape arrived with unseasonable warmth, the spring air finally shaking off winter's chill. They left the Blackwood estate in the early evening, driving to the train station with luggage packed for a week in Chicago. And Vivian had smiled coldly and told them to have a productive trip. Emma had forced herself to smile back, knowing this was the last time she'd ever see the woman who'd traded her nephew's happiness for criminal profit. But as their train pulled out of the station, Emma saw James standing on the platform, his face grave. She clutched Daniel's arm. "Something's wrong," she said. James looks frightened. Daniel had seen it too. Minutes later, a porter delivered a telegram marked urgent. Daniel read it, his face going pale. "The FBI contact was compromised," he said quietly. Someone in Vivian's organization discovered Marcus's evidence was about to be delivered. "They're moving to destroy it tonight." He looked at Emma, anguish in his eyes. "We can keep going. We can save ourselves and hope the authorities eventually build a case without Marcus's evidence, or we can go back and fight. We can make sure his death wasn't meaningless, but going back means risk." "Real risk, Emma. I can't make that choice for you." Emma thought about her wedding day, about standing in front of the mirror feeling like her life was ending. She thought about the moment she'd learned the truth, when fear had nearly consumed her. And she thought about the woman she'd become over the past week, someone stronger and braver than she'd known she could be. She thought about Marcus Blackwood, who died trying to do the right thing, and about her own family saved by blood money they didn't know was tainted. "We go back," she said firmly. "We finish this, together." The next hours blurred into a chaos of motion and fear. They returned to the estate under cover of darkness. James met them with 2 FBI agents he swore could be trusted. They broke into Vivian's private office while she was at a meeting, copying files and gathering physical evidence before the morning when Daniel knew his aunt planned to destroy everything. Emma stood watch, her heart in her throat, knowing that if they were discovered they'd share Marcus's fate. But luck and careful planning held. They got what they needed and got out. By dawn, federal agents were surrounding the Blackwood estate with warrants. Emma and Daniel watched from a safe house as Aunt Vivian and 3 of her key associates were led away in handcuffs. The evidence Marcus had died protecting, combined with what they'd gathered that night, was devastating. The investigation that followed would eventually bring down a criminal network that had operated for 3 decades. In the weeks that followed, Emma's parents learned the truth about the Blackwood family and wept with horror that their daughter had been endangered by their desperation. Emma assured them that she'd chosen to help Daniel finish his brother's work, that she'd made her own decisions. The FBI cleared the Hartwell family of any wrongdoing, and Daniel made arrangements to transfer legitimate funds from the Blackwood estate to pay off their farm, insisting that at least some good should come from his family's tainted legacy. 3 months later, on a sunny afternoon, Emma stood in a garden very different from the one at the Blackwood estate. This was a small cottage in Oregon, surrounded by wildflowers and overlooking the ocean. Daniel had bought it with money Marcus had hidden away years ago, an inheritance meant for starting over. They'd both taken new names, leaving behind the past, but choosing to keep the marriage that had saved them both. "Are you happy?" Daniel asked, coming to stand beside her. He asked her this question every day, as though still unable to believe she'd chosen to stay with him. Emma turned to him, this man who'd been a stranger and become her partner, her ally, and finally her love. "Ask me properly," she said with a smile. "The way you promised you would." Daniel took her hands, his gray eyes warm in the sunlight. "Emma, would you do me the honor of marrying me? Not because we're trapped or afraid, not because of arrangements or obligations, but because I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. Will you choose me, freely, the way I choose you?" Emma thought about the girl who'd stood in a wedding dress feeling like her life was ending, never knowing it was actually beginning. She thought about courage and choice, about love found in the most unexpected places, about truths that could destroy or set free. "Yes," she said simply, "I choose you. I choose us, today and always." Daniel kissed her then, not the brief formal kiss of their first wedding, but something deep and real and full of promise. And as she kissed him back, Emma understood that sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the truest destinations, that being forced into something can become the freedom to find everything, and that the truth they'd both been unable to escape had become the truth that finally set them free. In the distance, the ocean rolled against the shore, endless and beautiful and full of possibility. Emma and Daniel's story had begun with fear and deception, with a marriage neither had wanted. But it ended here, in sunlight and truth, with a love they'd both earned through courage and sacrifice. They would have a second wedding someday, a small ceremony with Emma's family present, this time with joy instead of sorrow. But for now, they had this moment, this choice, this life they'd built from the ashes of expectation, and it was enough, it was everything. It was the happy ending neither had dared to dream of, earned not through destiny but through deciding, together, that they deserved happiness and were willing to fight for it. Their past would always be complicated, marked by the circumstances that brought them together, but their future stretched ahead bright and clean, built on honesty and trust, and the kind of love that's forged in fire and emerges stronger for it. Emma Blackwood, who'd once been forced to wed a stranger, now stood freely beside the man she'd chosen to love. And in that choice and that freedom, she'd found not just happiness, but herself. The truth they couldn't escape had become the truth that made everything possible. And that, Emma thought as Daniel's arms came around her and they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold, was the greatest freedom of all.